Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
On today's Your Take, I'm joined by a musical duo. My guests are a husband and wife team whose music draws from the Americana tradition. To date, they have released 7 albums, including a collaboration with best-selling author Lee Child. That album is entitled Just the Clothes on My Back and is based on Child's iconic fictional character, Jack Reacher. My guests have had their songs covered by New Orleans outfit Evangeline and blues artist Troy Turner. The songs have also featured in the US police TV drama series Brooklyn South, the black comedy film The Smokers, and the romantic comedy movie The Girl Next Door. My guests have toured the globe and shared stages with many major artists in the music business: John Mayer, Joe Cocker, Aimee Mann, and the late Dan Fogelberg. Today I talked to Jen and Scott Smith, better known as the musical duo Naked Blue. We discussed their early lives, how they met one another, working together as a married couple, life on the road, their musical journey, and their work being featured in film and television projects. A warm good evening from Bristol here in the UK, and I believe you're based in Baltimore and it's sort of late afternoon, but thank you both for joining me on today's Your Take.
Thanks for having us.
I'm looking forward to talking about your musical journey individually and of course as a musical duo, but also as a married couple. I'm interested to talk about your music being covered by other artists and in films and TV projects. But moving away from the music, I wanted to talk kind of where it all began. And I wanted to both ask you when and where you were both born and kind of just find out a bit about your recollections of childhood and just give us some background on your parents, what they did for a living, and do you both also have siblings?
Well, it's interesting. We're both from a family of 5. We're the youngest of 5, 4 girls and a boy. And both of our fathers were with the government. Scott's in the FBI, and my father was a chemist. So we have a lot of similar memories of childhood, in the same setup, same types of households.
Sure. What about yourself, Scott? Where were you raised? And again, what were kind of your recollections of your early years? Were they kind of happy times in your life?
Yeah. Born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, just a few miles from where I am right now. Like I said, my dad, he was an FBI agent. And so that was an interesting kind of as a kid, because at the time he was working, what was happening a lot in the world for the FBI was that there's a lot of skyjackings. So my dad would occasionally just disappear for days at a time. Couldn't really say where he was going, but he was on a plane somewhere chasing somebody down that was trying to get to Cuba on a hijacked plane. I mean, I had a great childhood growing up. I had 4 sisters, which be a bit of life in hell, but no, it was really good.
They trained him really well.
Just a typical kind of suburban upbringing.
From a suburban upbringing, and you've both kind of given us a little bit of background on family life, I kind of want to find out where the kind of music fits in your musical backgrounds. Kind of what music were you both listening to growing up, and was it being played in the family home? And kind of later on, what kind of music were you buying or listening to on the radio?
In my house, music was important. My dad played classical guitar and had the opportunity kind of early in his science career to go to Vienna and study with Segovia. And he
wow.
kind of had to decide, am I going to start this family with this woman I'm seeing, or am I going to do, so he didn't, but he played, and around the house, they were always playing Appalachian bluegrass and lead belly and classical music. And they were fans, some of the new pop that they were at the time that they were enjoying, the Beatles and Bob Dylan and Joan Baez. And then my brother was always playing a lot of Alice Cooper in the basement and guitar-driven rock. And my older sisters were listening to more pop stuff like Chicago and Todd Rundgren, upstairs. And my first Gift album was the Monkees. And the first album that I bought with my own money when I was 6 was Neil Young Harvest.
Okay, so a huge kind of diverse mix of music, from various kind of roots music to more popular stuff, as you mentioned, with the kind of 60s boom with the Monkees and their big TV show in America as well.
Mm-hmm.
What about yourself, Scott? What kind of music were you listening to and discovering from a young age, and what artists kind of left a big impression and perhaps wanted you to pursue a career as a musician?
Yeah, well, my mom was a musician too. She was a piano player. So growing up, she started me out on piano, and she would play like stuff from her era. It would be like a lot of like 40s pop, like Carmichael or Andrews Sisters. And she also played classical. So there was that sort of old-timey pop and that. And then I had 4 older sisters, and so they were all Beatlemaniacs, and so there was a ton of Beatles in the house. They were, and so I got that early, indoctrinated into that thing early on, which I love, and I still love the Beatles. It's, they're probably still my biggest influence and favorite band. Then I was about 11 or 12 years old. I kind of wanted to switch over from piano to guitar just because guitar was cooler. And then I loved guitar rock stuff. I just loved all kinds of anything that had a lot of guitars and heavy guitars. But also I listened to a lot of Beach Boys, which I was just really fascinated with Beach Boys. And I loved the whole production end of what Brian Wilson did and the vocal stuff, and still trying to cop that stuff in my own production and stuff that I work on.
Interesting to hear both your kind of musical influences and where the origins came from, particularly from kind of your parents. And the Beatles thing certainly resonates with me as well. I kind of wanted to touch now on your schooling, and both kind of delve into your education, and wanted to ask you about your schooling and where you were schooled, and were they particularly happy times in your life, and did you go on to further education, and did you both have early career ambitions?
I did not have early career ambitions. I was always kind of I assumed I'd be a scientist like my dad. And school was okay. But ever since I can remember, I just wanted to start my life. Like I had this sense that I'm here in this holding tank doing something that I'm not exactly sure how it's going to apply to the rest of my life, but I just want to get my life started. I wasn't unhappy, but I was never a committed student. I did okay in school, and I got through 3 semesters of college and just then left and just started doing things. And it wasn't until, I mean, I'd always played music and started writing songs when I was 11, maybe, or 10. But it never occurred to me that I might be, that I would be a musician as a vocation until it just sort of happened after, after college, a couple of years after college. It just happened. And then suddenly, I quit my day job in 91 with Scott, and suddenly it was full time. And it's, that's where it's been ever since. But I didn't have the plan. I was just doing lots of things, and this one stuck, the music stuck.
What about yourself, Scott? When you look back at kind of, I know it's a long time ago, but how did you enjoy your kind of early school years, and did you kind of have early ambitions to maybe be a musician or do something completely different to what you do now?
Yeah, well, my schooling was, I spent 12 years in Roman Catholic private schools. It was interesting, and my high school was a college prep school with all boys, and hard school, a lot of work, and that's when I decided, it was in high school that I decided, this is what I want to do. I want to pursue this thing in music, which is interesting because my mom, she was like a little child prodigy. She was 5 or 6 years old. She was playing organ at a big Catholic mass, as a pipe organ, just a little kid. And when she was about 16 years old, I think, her piano teacher went to her parents and said, "Hey, this kid is amazing. I want to take her to New York because I think she could really do something. I know folks up there, and I want to do this with her. She's good enough to break, in a big city." And her parents said no. And then it was whatever, 40s, 50s, and she had, by 19, she was married and had a baby on the way, and that's what women did. And so when I decided, I was about 16 years old, I went to my mom. I said, "Hey, I really want to, I love music and I want to pursue this." She was like, "Go, man, go." She was like my biggest champion. So she was living vicariously through me, or what. But I got like great encouragement, which is awesome, because I knew a lot of guys growing up that didn't. Their parents discouraged it and kind of stomped the very beginning of the dream. And so yeah, I was very lucky. And I decided that in high school was that I wanted to do it. And I ended up going to college, and I got, after a couple of years, again, we were working, and I was doing it at that point, and that's what I wanted to do. So there's nothing else I really wanted to study or learn.
It seems clear from what you've been saying that you both always had a desire and love for music, and that was kind of the thing you ultimately wanted to do, was to become musicians. I wanted to ask a little bit about your kind of early musical pilgrimage, and tell us about some of the first instruments you started playing, your first experiments in songwriting and composition, and any bands you were in before you both met one another.
I really wanted cello as my elementary school instrument, and my parents, I could tell that they were planning on, picking up something for me in the 3rd grade. And when I came home from school one day, there was a little box on the coffee table, and it was a flute. And I worked hard and played it for 6 years, and they let me into the school band 2 years early. And and I didn't like it at all. And but at the same time, my dad had started me on guitar when I was around 5, and I got my first electric guitar at 13. And I guess first performances were a friend of mine. I was a waitress in a restaurant, and he was gigging there, and he would call me up to sing harmonies. And then he moved back to Delaware and started an open mic. And he'd say, "Come up and play the open mic." And I'd say, "I don't know any songs." So he'd send me 3 songs to learn, and I would do that, and I would go, and it was probably 87, 86, and I go up and play, and it was so much fun. And then by the time I had about 15 songs together, I got together with a girlfriend of mine, Angie Miller, from college, that we used to sit around and play music together. And we started gigging together as, I think we were going into a bar somewhere, and somebody on the street said, "Oh, look, a couple of skirts with guitars." And so we decided to call ourselves Two Skirts. And,
Okay.
And we had a pretty good run in this region, you know, the Mid-Atlantic region, for a few years. And
Did you record as well as a duo then, or
we did
was it
some
solely
recordings.
live?
We didn't release anything, but we do have some recordings. I actually just got the 2-inch tape from the studio. I don't know what I'll ever do with it, but I've got 600 pounds of 2-inch tape.
Must have been interesting listening to that back, I'd imagine. Yeah, reminiscing
Yeah.
about old times. Yeah.
It
What-
was great fun, and I learned a lot about harmonies with her. She had great attention to detail, and in a way that I didn't, and so I learned a lot about putting harmonies together.
What about yourself, Scott? Where did kind of the whole musical journey begin with yourself? And same question again, were there any sort of bands you perform with, or did you perform as a solo artist before you met Jem?
Yeah, so again, growing up as a kid, really early on, there was always a piano and an organ in the house because my mom played both. So she started me off pretty young. I wanted to learn how to play, and I wasn't the best student, but I did pick up a little bit. I mean, I still played a little bit. And I think my sister had a guitar, she fooled around with, and I would grab that thing and beat on a little bit every now and then. But it's probably when I was about 11 or 12 when I really got the bug for the guitar thing. And yeah, there was no looking back. Once I got that guitar, man, I just locked myself in the room for years. That's all I did. And so
Still all you do.
yeah, and so I just, I got, good enough to play pretty early on, and I was in high school, and I started playing in bands, and I was always the youngest because I was a kid. I was like 15, 16, and playing with older guys, which is good because, I had to get better. You always play with people that are better than you, so it forces you to be better. And it's funny because we would play bars, and they used to have to sneak me in because I wasn't old enough to play in these clubs. And so the band would go in, and they would set all the stuff up, and they would like open the fire exit and sneak me in and get on stage and play the set and go hide in the parking lot, on the breaks.
Did you play to some quite intimidating audiences in certain parts of the States and in certain territories and bars and so on?
Yeah. Man, we played some pretty rough stuff, man. It was like biker clubs and biker bars, and luckily they liked us, and we were doing this sort of thing like playing Steppenwolf and Bad Company and stuff they loved, and so if they liked you, you were good. But yeah, it was tough crowds, man. It was rough joints early on, so but builds character, man.
Interesting to kind of hear both your kind of musical backgrounds, and I'm sure there was a great deal of learning and life experience of being on the road and, like you say, playing in different venues to different audiences. I expect that gave you kind of a lot of perspective as well. I kind of wanted to turn to the point of the discussion about how you met one another and what ultimately made you decide to pursue a career as a musical duo. And then when we come on to the band name, Naked Blue, is there a story behind that name?
Yeah, well, to start, I was working at a music shop selling guitars. My last real job, which is great because it gave me time. I was playing, in bands at the time, and I'd sell guitars during the day and play them at night. And Jen was a customer.
Yeah, and he was the only guy in the store because it's kind of a man's world, the music store. And when you come in as a girl, it's clearly assumed you're a singer or a keyboard player for some reason. I don't know why. And Scott was the only guy at the store that treated me like a guitar player, which I really appreciated. So I would only go when he was there, and maybe three times in, we started to talk, and I needed somebody to record some song demos and for me, and he needed somebody to sing on his song demos. So we decided to trade that favor. And that's how we got started in 89. And then it was great fun. And I liked him a lot too. But we both had other people that we were busy with. And the work was great. So we worked together for, I guess in 91, we started to have so many bookings that we just decided to quit our day jobs and make a go of it full time and jump in. And I was optimistic, and Scott was like, this will never work. It's a theme. It's been a theme throughout our working life together, where I'll have this idea and I'm really fired up about it, and I'll say that'll never work, and he'll list all the things that could go wrong, and then I'll spend a day putting my pitch together to convince him of how great it's going to be. And so in 91, that was my first one, was let's do this for a living.
I think I trust her by now.
Scott was obviously telling us that he was working at a music shop at the time. What were you doing in terms of your kind of full-time job before you decided to quit that and pursue the musical journey?
Just doing a lot of things. I was catch riding and training hunter jumpers and dressage horses, and teaching and brokering horses. And I had just gotten off a 2-year gig on a soft crab boat, culling soft crabs. And I had also a side gig traveling around selling cash register ribbons to people like Walmart and Piggly Wiggly.
Okay, right. Okay.
So, yeah.
I wanted to come on and talk about the music, and I wanted to ask you, Jen, can you describe your music and specifically how it's influenced by the Americana tradition? And can you also tell us about your working relationship and how the music and business partnership works?
I think that the Americana influence is, shows itself in the storytelling style of the songwriting. And also, we use a lot of symbolism, and things are stories, just about everything, I think, that we've written. Of course, acoustic guitar at times, Irish bouzouki, those instruments of choice. And sometimes we'll just write and produce something that is directly taking elements of bluegrass or country music or folk music, while both of us have always had this love of rock too, And for decades, we thought, at some point, well, we have to choose between this rootsy influenced singer-songwriter thing, or do we want to be a rock band? And we never chose that. And I think every album has elements of both of those things. And it's worked out okay that way. And we check in with each other, as a partnership. From a business standpoint, we're set up as a partnership, 50-50. We both have equal say and own everything together. And I think it's easier because we're comfortably, happily married. So it's all just one little party between the two of us. Scott handles I handle more of the admin and sales and marketing, and Scott handles the production and studio work and maintaining the gear and advancing shows with the tech audio tech stuff. Kind of how we split our things.
Scott, I wanted to ask you, still on kind of the musical side, and you obviously working as a partnership and also working creatively and in business together as well. I wanted to ask you, are you currently signed to a label, and how do you go about releasing and marketing your records? And then secondary to that, I was going to ask you, what sort of venues do you tend to perform, and do you ever play outside of America?
So first off, no, we're not signed to a label. We were on a label years ago out of New York called Viceroy. And then we were on a little label in the UK and another little label in Germany. That's been years since we just sort of started making our own records and releasing them under our own little label.
It's kind of a shame that because it was our first album that got signed, and we were just kind of kids, and we didn't know what to do with it. Youth is wasted on the young, they say. And I think back of, wow, we could have done this and that, and but it all worked out okay.
Yeah, so once we started, and being on a label is cool because somebody's doing a lot of that work for you too, but it would be frustrating because at that point we had been doing all of our own stuff. We had released a couple little records, like cassette tapes and stuff, and we were working like crazy ourselves and running this business. When you hand it over to a label, it's nice in the fact that they do stuff for you, but it could be frustrating too, because you see the stuff they're not doing and maybe you wish they were doing. Your hands are a little tied. So when we got back control of that and we started doing our own records, and Jen is really the marketing guru behind it all. And, having the internet changed a lot of things on how you can market yourself and do it. And gosh, we used to have to lick stamps and send postcards out for our gigs, and that was insane. I mean, thousands and thousands. We would spend, I don't know, 500, 600 bucks a month just on postage, mailing out postcards. Wow. Not having to do that anymore because of, posting your stuff online, sending out an email. It was, a huge change.
Yeah, and booking, I would go to the library and find magazines from like Minneapolis and look up, who's what, venues that are advertising, because you couldn't go online and see what the place looked like and read about their booking policy. You had to pick up the phone and call Minneapolis. I don't know that if I could, I don't know how we did it, but yeah,
there was no option.
And the labels in Germany and the UK, that was delightful, especially the German label, the Dagonka brothers, and the label Semaphore, and they put together a fantastic tour that was a publicity tour, mostly. I think we played a little bit on television, but they had like the first day we had breakfast at a cafe with Associated Press, and then we went to Armed Forces Network in Frankfurt, and then we were doing a TV show an hour away, and all this, we had a whole hour on Radio Gong in Munich interview, and they played our music, and they just did such a great, it was really exciting, and great job with it. And we still have fans and still see that people are listening to our music in the UK and Germany all these years later, even though we haven't had a chance to get back there yet.
I want to come on to the recording process, because you've released 7 full-length albums to date. How do you find the recording and producing process? And is there a particular project you're most proud of, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I love the recording part of it. Early on, I was probably 16 when I built my first little home studio. And again, I was fascinated with the Beatles and the Beach Boys and all the production stuff. And I just studied that stuff and tried to tear it apart and figure out how it was happening. But yeah, I love that world too. And we've been lucky enough to have had our own studio for a real long time and able to do our own recordings. And sorry, what was the second half?
Yeah, the second part of the question was, of the albums you've released so far, is there a project you're most proud of, and why?
That's like picking a favorite kid.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Only one of them gets a Christmas present. No.
I mean, sometimes it's the first one, Wish, just because we listen to it
On
now.
our own, yeah.
It was the first one we did on our, what is it, the Roland VS 880 or something, 8-track. And we did it in a crummy little basement in our first row house.
And it was after being on the label. So, I mean, we had, the label had paid, and we had done this big record in a big studio in New York. And so we were trying to follow that up on our own at home in the basement.
Yeah, and it still sounds good, and it still gets picked up for film and TV stuff.
And this was pre-digital?
Yeah.
Well,
What was
pretty
the?
well.
It was a CD.
No, we recorded that on. We had done a few before.
Oh yeah.
Even before the label, we had made a couple records that were, I don't count really anymore, but because we just released them on cassettes or whatever at the time. But no, that record was done on digital. It was fairly primitive and just limited. But yeah, it came out great, and then just the fact that we pulled off on our own, we felt good about it. And I guess that one was still.
Yeah.
It had a lot of weight to it, and so.
And it got us it got us launched in a way that with a bigger audience, because we had put it together. We tried to get a deal, after our label went out of business. We spent a year or two, I can't remember, trying to get another deal. And then we thought, well, let's just be songwriters. So let's do this collection of songs, and this will just be something that we can pitch. But people really liked it, and we were still out gigging, and it helped launch us into the next stage of what we were doing as a DIY artist.
You mentioned that the word songwriters is kind of perfect timing, because shortly I want to talk about your music being featured in films and television programs. But before that, your music's been covered by other artists, including New Orleans band Evangeline and the blues player Troy Turner. How did these artists discover your music, and what were your thoughts on their versions of your songs?
So we had we were working with John Alasia, who has gone on, he had a basement studio in Arlington, Virginia, and he's gone on to produce John Mayer and Ben Folds and I mean, countless huge records. But he connected us with Rob Fraboni, who had done Joe Cocker album and bought some Bonnie Raitt stuff. And we went to New Orleans to record some demos with Rob Fraboni producing. And Evangeline stopped by the studio to say hi to Rob because he had worked with them on their last album while we were cutting this song called We Will Fly. And we got to meet them, and they were awesome women. And probably 3 years later, they called and said, we loved that. We've always remembered that song that you guys were recording when we came in the studio, and we have a record coming out on MCA, and wondering if we could cut it. And you know, of course, we said absolutely. And it was great. It was like Christmas to hear like all different take. You know, it was more straight ahead country sounding and really nice recording. And yeah, and they'd made some choices, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a great choice. We should do that, you know, from now on with that song. And the
yeah, it's always fun. Like, I mean, we've had a few of those moments where somebody has covered our tune, and then we finally hear it done, and it's fun. I always enjoy it. You know, it's like, wow, that's a whole new take, especially when it's further away from ours. It's better. It's fun to hear a whole new spin on something we've written.
And the Troy Turner was, you know, very different. And I think that cut came, it was a co-write with Anton Fig, who is a drummer, the David Letterman drummer for a long time. We wrote that with him for a movie called Sex, Drugs, and Democracy, which is a whole other story. But I think Anton maybe got that cut by Troy Turner. Viceroy, or John Tiven. But anyway, yeah, I love it. Like, I would love if people did we did a 20th anniversary show, and we invited 16 artist friends to pick 2 songs from our catalog, and they played our songs. We did a few songs and introduced the show, and the rest of the night was just us watching our favorite artists playing our songs, and it was just the best thing ever.
Oh wow, incredible! Who were the artists involved in that project?
It was all people from our area, good friends of ours, our favorite artists, you know, in Maryland, DC, Virginia, mostly good friends of ours. We just loved and admired, you know, their music. They're all songwriters and performers and artists themselves, and they all just did their own complete takes on our songs, and that was a lot of fun. Having a whole night of that.
I bet it's incredibly fulfilling. First of all, somebody covering your material, and it's also interesting as well that your music's been not only covered by other artists that you've mentioned so far, but it's also been featured in various movies and television dramas, and some of the credits have included the TV series Brooklyn South, the dark teen comedy movie The Smokers, and the romantic comedy film The Girl Next Door. Do you think the exposure has led to new people discovering your music, with it being featured in film and TV? And do you have any ambitions to compose an original score for a TV or film project?
It's interesting because until recently with streaming, it was hard to gauge what was happening. You know, we would have something in a movie, and we might get an occasional email or an order from out of town, but you know, who knows what that was from. And but now we can see exactly what's happening. You know, for the first time, we had this song in the new Reacher series on Amazon, which has been their biggest hit yet, which is so exciting. So we had a track in that, and we were able to watch our Spotify plays and Apple Music plays and visits to the website, and just, what was it, like 48,000% increase in viewers. And we could watch how many people stayed with us, and then started discovering the rest of the catalog, and then it was ordering CDs. But really, it's the first time that we've had access to that kind of data. Prior to that, I think with the other placements, it was the excitement of our fan base. Our friends and fans would just be excited. They might be watching something and not even know. And we'd get a call and say, "Oh my God, you're on the Young and the Restless right now."
It's really interesting that you mentioned your music being featured in the Jack Reacher series, because this moves on nicely to my next question. And interestingly, earlier on in our interview, you spoke about the influence of the Americana tradition, but you also spoke about your fascination for storytelling. And storytelling is obviously a key part of your music, telling stories to music. And that kind of leads on nicely to your collaboration with novelist Lee Child. What made you decide to produce an album based on the character of Jack Reacher? How did the project evolve? And can you kind of discuss the process of writing the songs, recording the album, and eventually going on tour to tour the songs to an audience?
Yeah, well, it's a strange story. We were just fans. We read the books. We were fans of Lee's, just because we both read a lot, and we read his book series for years. And I was just particularly struck by it, and I had heard somewhere that he liked music. Lee, the author.
Well, and you can tell from the books that
Yeah.
he has an interest in music.
And so I wrote him a fan letter, basically, and I just said, "Hey, love your books, big fan. My wife and I play music. I would love to just sort of return the favor and send you a CD. You've been entertained us for years. Love to give a little something back to you." And told him also, because he bounces kind of all where he lives, but he spends a lot of time in New York. And I said, "Man, if we're ever in New York, I would love to come on out and buy a beer." And sure enough, like 2-3 months later, I think, we had a show in New York. So I pinged him. I said, "Hey, we're going to be in New York," and he came out. He just showed up at this club in New
Oh,
York.
wow, that's incredible.
We met, and the funny thing was, he said, "It's so funny because when you sent me your stuff, and I realized that I already knew you guys, and I was a fan. I had this record that you guys did years ago, and it was like one of my favorite records, and blah blah blah."
And then he got a couple other records, and then
Yeah, so it just turned out he knew who we were. We knew, and we became friends. And just throughout the years, when he was on doing a book tour or whatever, we might meet up with him and have dinner or something. And we always threatened. We were like, "Man, we should write something together." Just sort of we just kept saying it, and it never happened. It was, I don't know, 10 years or more. And then finally, a few years ago, Jen, thing that she just put it together. She was like, "Look, man, let's do this. Let's do this for real."
I put a date on it and I framed it up. This is what's going to happen. And when we get up there, we'll decide what to write about. And if we have some good songs, once we get into it, why don't you could pick your favorite artists, and we could pitch this to them. And I'm thinking maybe Mark Knopfler, and who knows. And we can manage the album release, and so we got up there, and it was terrifying because he's brilliant. I mean, I don't know if you've watched any interviews, but he's a brilliant guy, and he writes long novels, and what he writes is in have 400 or 500 pages, and what we write is 3.5 minutes. It's two totally different, it's coming from different places. And he was really nervous, and we were really nervous when we got there. And we sat down, and he said, "Let's write about Reacher." And we're like, "Okay." And we talked for a while and started playing a little something, and he would just start writing. And we did a little bit of shuffling, song crafting with his lyric, but he was the predominant lyricist on it. And we just knocked it out fast, and it was
Yeah, he was like,
really
"This is so easy."
good.
We're like, no, it's usually not this easy. Like, it's usually a lot of work.
Interestingly, it's complete different discipline being a novelist to like you say, writing a 400 or 500 page fictional novel, to being a songwriter and writing a 2-3 minute song. Did that process come naturally for him, or did it take him some time, or how did that kind of work for him, adapting to that kind of discipline?
He's a pretty quick study, he had fun with it, because he's like, "Man, I never get to rhyme." Right? So rhyme scheme is, something he never gets to do.
He's always trying not to. He's like, he'll rhyme by accident, and then he'll be like, "Oh, darn it," and he'll delete the rhyme because you can't rhyme in what he's doing.
Yeah, and so we would write lines in the tunes too, and like shit, like trimming the fat way down to, you got to say this in 5 words. You have to, whereas he's wax poetically forever, on a certain attribute of somebody. We don't have that luxury. It's got to be quick and dirty, and every word really counts. But yeah, he snapped in pretty quickly, and
he's a fan of some more experimental kind of music as well. And so he wasn't he wasn't as structure oriented as we were. And so there was a little bit of back and forth about, but we should have a chorus and it should repeat itself. And he's like, "Okay, well, we can do that."
Once the songs were recorded and obviously composed, the music put to those lyrics, and you had a finished album, how do you kind of look back at the album, the project itself? Are you happy with it? And what was it like going out on the road and sharing those songs with an audience? What was kind of the feedback from the fan base?
Well, the biggest concern at the time, when we didn't even know we were going to be writing about his character, Reacher. We just thought we were going to try to write a song with a child about whatever. But he wanted to write the songs about this character, and then he wanted us to perform it. And so these were 2 things that we weren't really ready for.
Prepared for, yeah. And the lyric, if you've heard of the album, I'm singing Reacher in the first person.
Yeah, which we
wondered if that, how is that going to fly?
Yeah, because they have been getting so much flack about the Tom Cruise playing Reacher in the movies. And it's still, even though it's all been redeemed, he's still getting crap about that. So it was like, boy, people are going to go crazy when there's a woman singing Reacher now.
And we asked him, we said, do you need to ask? We're talking about it over a beer in his living room. We said, "Well, do you need to ask somebody, like Random House, or something?
Can you do this?"
And he's like, "I can do anything I want." Like, okay.
And how was the kind of the overall reaction to the album in terms of like the sales and the kind of reaction from the fans? And are you kind of happy with the project overall?
We were really happy with it.
Yeah.
For me, I started out kind of a more bluesy, rootsy rock, where Scott was more of the pop influence. And the character demanded kind of a bluesy, rootsy thing. So it was a blast for me, that part of it. And for some of our longtime fans, to hear us revisiting some of that. And just the excitement of what a cool project. I mean, it was just the whole thing was just this oddball friendship born of coincidence, and the excitement of getting to write with this brilliant, famous author. And so the shows were really well attended. We had seen him do a talk at the Smithsonian before all of this, and he was charming and funny and consummately entertaining. And so when we were thinking about the tour, see, he plays a little bass, but he wasn't going to play bass on tour. So we thought, well, what if we're all sitting? We can have the rock band, but we're all sitting, and Lee's on stage, and he's doing his thing in between songs and Q&A, answering questions, telling the story behind the song and a little insight into the character, and then we play the song. And so it was a new format for us, but it was great, and the banter, and we had a lot of funny stories together from the project, and people loved it, and it doubled our audience, and we were able to play some bigger venues in those 2 years after the album came out.
Yeah, the show was more like, the show was more of an event. Everybody paid attention from the beginning to the end, because it was captivating. Every song was sort of, Lee got to talk about his character. It was all fans of his that had read the books too, and fans of ours that started reading the books. So everybody was really there for the show, for all of these shows, and was glued to what was happening on the stage. And they were probably my most favorite shows ever.
Yeah.
From initial fan letter to working on almost a once in a lifetime experience project that sounds completely fascinating, almost like no boundaries, you can almost do whatever you like. I kind of wanted to move on from a best-selling author, a collaboration, to actually touring and sharing the stage with some fine musicians and household names, including John Mayer, Joe Cocker, the late Dan Fogelberg, and Aimee Mann. What have you learned from being on the road with these musicians? And can you share any memorable moments or stories working with some of those artists or any others?
Yeah, I mean, but as an opening act, during that time, we were doing bars with friends and playing all kinds of places. Maybe we're in the lingerie department at Macy's for a grand opening, or doing ridiculous stuff. And then we're on stage with Joe Cocker, and when you're that close to somebody doing that show, it's a really good, it really sets a bar. It makes you remember this is what something great looks like, and how can we, what can we do to get closer to that as we go along.
Yeah, and it's hard work. Like you realize, how you get there and how you stay there is working your ass off. And it doesn't matter who you are, what level you're at. It's always going to take a lot of work, and that's why it's kind of what separates them from us. I mean, aside from being great and all that, it's you got to work hard. That never ends.
Interestingly, I've spoken to a few artists who've toured with some big names, like I've just mentioned, and I've kind of never really asked this question. I've kind of delved into it a little bit when one interviewee told me he did a tour with Bob Dylan, but never met Bob Dylan. But my question was going to be do you ever manage to get close to any of those artists, or is that difficult because they're kind of controlled by a big PR team and with sound engineers and a huge team involved with them? Or have you had any moments where you've been able to sit down with some of those performers and actually maybe build a little bit of a relationship or rapport with them?
We have. I think the person that stuck with us as a friendship the most was Chris Thompson. We opened for his band in the UK, in London, at the Bottom Line, I think was the venue. And he obviously, sang Blinded by the Light.
Yeah.
With Manfred Mann.
Yeah, and of course it was a Springsteen song, wasn't it? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And so when he was in the States, he invited us out to a show, and then we've, have been in touch over the years. Joe Cocker was dropped off 1 minute before hit on the fire escape, came down, hit the stage, and as soon as he was done with the last note, he was back out the fire escape and in his car. So we never even saw him. But I mean, we had dinner with John Mayer, and
everybody's different. It just depends how, again, man, everybody's just working. It's just like it's their job, and I'm sure, it's probably different. You never played with Paul McCartney, but he's probably like getting dropped off at the last minute, and somebody's, doing a lot of things for him. But on that mid-level stuff, they're just working.
We played with Foreigner 3 times, oddly. I don't know why we got that call. A private party in Colorado, in Aspen, Colorado, and a big venue in Constitution Hall in DC and somewhere else. And that we had dinner with them, in the green room, and they were all nice. Yeah.
Actually, like when we were playing like Ringo Starr and Peter Frampton,
Right.
we played
At the
casino with them, and everybody's just in the cafeteria eating, some together. It's pretty.
We've met a lot of people. I met Keith Richards and Bonnie Raitt. I was at a rehearsal, an expensive wino rehearsal in New York. It's really cool.
Did you get to meet Keith for long? What was the what was the experience like?
I mean, he was pretty busy. We spoke briefly, and I was with his keyboard. Ivan Neville was playing keyboards with him, and we had just done some recording with Ivan Neville. So he was like, "Come on up to New York and hang out for the weekend." And he was busy doing his thing, so we didn't like go have beers or anything. But he was pleasant and funny, really funny.
And then at the end of the conversation, you said, "Any chance of us being on the next Stones tour?"
We didn't even ask that.
I wanted to, we come on shortly to the kind of final questions that we ask all Your Take guests, but I've got a couple of questions to ask you before that. Firstly, I wanted to ask you how difficult it is to make a living from being a professional musician today. And what would you say are the major obstacles, and what opportunities and things that have happened on your musical journeys that you think have helped you pursue and be persistent with what you want to do musically?
Is it hard making a living?
So sorry?
Is it hard making a living as a musician? I mean, hard is relative because you're having such a good time, right?
It's harder than it's ever been. I'll say that. It's changed. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time now, and we've seen, it changed dramatically. There's so many things you don't get paid for anymore. I mean, a big part of our income was derived for years, playing gigs, being on the road, selling CDs from the States, selling CDs in record stores. That was, a third to half of our income.
Mhm.
That just disappeared, like pretty much overnight. It just stopped. And then even with, say, the streaming, I mean, nobody pays for that stuff anymore. I mean, when originally the whole Napster thing, that just it got set a precedent that, okay, you don't have to pay for music anymore, and a whole generation was, indoctrinated into this idea that music is just for the taking. And that's kind of where it stayed since then.
Performing, we're still, there's still income in performing, and having the film and TV thing has been a great boon. That has really helped a lot, because the licensing fees are nice, and then there's royalties after, after that.
But even radio channels, I mean, radio used to, there were royalties in commercial radio paying, and Spotify has pretty much destroyed all of that.
Would you say, from your perspective, would you say kind of touring is the most reliable source of income for musicians in today's kind of music business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we were lucky enough to be able to build our fan base before the digital age started, and before it was so much easier and affordable to make records at home. There's so much great music available. Like, where do you even, 20 years ago, all the labels would be looking at the same 10 artists, and they'd all know that, and they'd get together and they'd talk about these 10 or 15 artists. And now anybody in the industry, they might have a list of 30 people they're looking at, and nobody has the same list of artists, because it's just every kid in America in their parents' basement making great stuff.
My final question before we kind of move on to the 13 questions that we ask all our guests is, do you both have musical plans or projects you're currently working on? And what are kind of your long-term future musical plans?
Yeah, I mean, we're always working on music. It's our mindset with it now. It used to be we would, again, back to those days where you make a record and then you would tour the record, put together 10 or 12 tunes and put them all together and hit the road and try to get people to buy it. Since that's not so much a thing, I think we're kind of concentrating now. We've done singles. And most of the people, like artists that I work with, that I produce, it's the same mindset. Everybody's doing more of a single thing, and it's a digital release. So I think plans for any new material, any new stuff we write is probably going to it's going to be
it'll be
leaning that way.
Single oriented, maybe collaborating more with people that we like. And I picked up cello about 15 years ago. And I thought, I'm getting older, right? And it's kind of a young person's business. So one of my plans is to get my cello thing happening, because you can gracefully be performing on the cello in your 90s. So that's my plan.
Jen,
sorry,
you carry on. Sorry, what was it you were going to say?
Yeah, no, that's my plan. I mean, right when we have the opportunity to write, but I guess if I'm going to dig into a major project, it might be getting my cello chops together, and and I play on other people's records and have done some touring with other people.
We have next month we run a songwriting retreat that we've been doing for 8 or 9 years now.
Yeah, 12 years, 10 years. Yep.
And so that's great. We get, so we're teaching songwriting stuff and all the stuff we've learned over the years. I produce a bunch of artists in the studio. So yeah, we've diversified it a bit, because we're not doing 250 shows a year anymore on the road. But,
and it's an odd time right now because of the pandemic. We just got shut down in 2020, and are just like, we haven't really thought about what we're doing next. So thanks for asking. We'll probably talk about it tomorrow.
Jen and Scott Smith, we move on to the final questions. 13 kind of quick fire questions we ask every single Your Take guest. Get these same 13 questions. Don't have to think about them in any sort of detail, whatever comes straight into your head. Here we go. Naked Blue. These are the questions. So what would you say, both of you, is your favorite pastime?
Playing music. That's
Um,
not, is that a pastime?
Yes, well, I think of pastime as more like a hobby sort of thing.
Cooking and gardening.
Maybe fly fishing.
Okay. We touched a little bit on film in the interview, especially your films being used in movies. But what would you say is your favorite film and why?
Mine is Beasts of the Southern Wild. The sound of it, the soundtrack, and the way that they used noise and music instead of dialogue, and the fairy tale aspect of it, and the connection between the people and their natural environment and the home. You know, the concept of home, I think.
What about yourself, Scott?
One of my favorite films, there's this movie, it was out years ago, it's called The Man in the Moon, but it's not about Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
It was this, I think it was Reese Witherspoon's first movie, and I believe the director that did To Kill a Mockingbird did this movie as well. And I just really stuck with it. It's beautifully shot. It's a really beautiful kind of heartbreaking story, and it's not a big movie, it's just a little film, but I just thought it was done with a ton of feeling.
And he said, after it finished, he said to me, that little kid is going to be a star one day. And she was.
Yeah, it's like her first movie.
And went on to win the Academy Award as well, didn't she, for playing June Carter?
Yeah.
We spoke about your collaboration with Lee Child, of course, at some length. But who would you say is your favorite novelist?
You know, a tough one. I'm reading Hunter Thompson right now. Maybe I have to say Lee, if he's watching, because he might be.
Yeah.
John Irving. I gave you 3.
And what about your choices, Scott?
Oh gosh, I got so many. I read a lot. Maybe Lee is definitely in there in the top 10. And there's the guy that Lee is a huge fan of too. His name John D. MacDonald. He's an American author. He wrote like 60 some books. You know who might be, well, if I had to like, you know, Stephen King is an amazing writer, and I think he'll go down in history as a young poet. I really do. I think just his volume of work and
he's very prolific.
Yeah, but he's
Yeah.
more than that. He's I mean, he really he writes great short stories, which is really hard to do, and then novels. He can cover both of those. Maybe I'd say Stephen King.
If you could have had a different profession outside of music, what would it have been?
Well, I thought about being a writer, like being a novelist, being Stephen King. There you go. Yeah, maybe that. I think it'd be fun to write books, write stories. It's not, you know, it's just the long version songs, basically.
I thought, you know, working with horses. That changed for me, you know, that's what I thought I was going to do. And it's dangerous and really hard work, and you don't make any money, but I was okay with that. But then when the music thing got busier, I realized, well, this is hard work and you don't make a lot of money, but it's not dangerous. So that's why I jumped ship.
Who in life would you both say has been your greatest inspiration?
I'd say Jen is my greatest
Yeah,
inspiration. No, he is, man. She's rich, smart, and
yeah.
I think I got really lucky, man.
I got really lucky. We both got really lucky. But Scott challenges me constantly and inspires me. Yeah.
No, that's a lovely answer. We move on to from inspirations now to newspapers. Do you read a newspaper? And if so, which one?
New York Times.
I wonder what that was for a minute.
That's really the cat.
Oh, yeah. He's an internet
He's kind of a
celebrity.
rock star.
Yeah.
New York Times.
Gosh, I don't, well, a physical paper, I read all the, what is the Guardian?
Yeah, that's
I find
yeah,
myself
one of
reading
our-
a lot of Guardian
Yeah,
articles,
I read a lot of Guardian too.
and I think it's really well written, and I like the Guardian.
It's
Mhm.
interesting that a lot of the people we ask their favorite newspapers or the newspaper of choice, pretty much every single guest we've had on has chosen The Guardian. In fairness, a lot of our guests have come from sort of a creative background, but so far it does seem to be the paper of choice, and it would be my personal choice as well.
Yeah.
We talk food now. What would you say is your favorite food?
Mine is blue crabs.
Anything she cooks, because she's an amazing cook. Yes, that's a tough, this is hard, these are hard questions, James. Favorite food? Maybe, well, yeah, because I mean, blue crabs are like a Maryland thing. It's sort of a local food, and it's like our local delicacy. And yeah, I would say I'll go for blue crabs too.
This next one always stumps a lot of guests. We ask them to choose their favorite cultural icon. It could be maybe a political figure, someone who's changed the world, invented something. Who would you choose?
I'm torn, I think, between Noam Chomsky and Snoop Dogg.
Why them?
Noam Chomsky, the way he writes, his intensity and the research he's done, and how he's, talks about language and his theory of language, and I find Snoop charming and charismatic and funny.
What about yourself, Scott? A cultural icon?
Oh gosh, I want to like pick somebody.
Eddie Van, what about Eddie
Well, I was
Van
gonna say,
Halen?
like comes to mind is Eddie Van Halen, because I mean he literally changed my life at the age of 14 or 15, and he was iconic to me. He was the guy that came in and just turned the rock guitar world on its ear and has never been imitated. And yeah, he had a huge impact on me. So all right, let's go Eddie Van Halen.
Curse words next. What would you say is your favorite curse word and why?
Fuck. Because it's what do you call flexible? It's what's the word for it? It can mean a lot of things and be used in a lot of different ways. And it's percussive. It's just one syllable, and it's usually funny if it's used properly.
And what about yourself, Scott?
I like that one too, but maybe shit, because I mean shit doesn't even really fall into, it's almost not a curse word anymore, but it's very multifaceted too. Good shit, bad shit. Oh shit. Holy shit. Oh shit. It covers a lot of ground and has a lot of meaning just in one word. Well, much like fuck.
Away from the curse words and when you're not working or touring, what would you say is your favorite place or holiday destination?
Home at Christmas, but
Well, gosh, I mean, we've spent a bunch of time over the years in like the Bahamas, and it's pretty magical. I might pick that.
beach,
If I
yeah.
had to go somewhere and spend a week, just out of the blue, I would say somewhere in the Bahamas. a little, like an uninhabited island in the Bahamas, not a crowded
It's,
place.
it's always difficult to ask musicians this next one, especially when they've got so many sources of inspiration. But who is your favorite music artist and what is your favorite album?
It's just, that who's your favorite and what's your favorite one isn't, that's impossible, but Chris Whitley stands out to me because there's no one else like him, and there's a wildness about what he does, and every album is very different and experimental and very, very raw. And I think Rocket House maybe is my favorite album of Chris Whitley's.
Oh man, I'm gonna land on the Beatles, just because, yeah, still trying to figure that out.
Which Beatles album? Because they did so many good ones.
man.
They didn't really make a bad album, in fairness.
If I had to pick one album, I would just pick Sgt. Pepper's because it was a double album, so there's a lot, it covers a lot of ground,
Mhm.
and it was an amazing record, and it was the record that they made to answer Brian Wilson's Pet Sounds, and so it has that connection for me as well. Yeah, I'll go for Sgt. Pepper's.
And the last two. Firstly, what is your greatest achievement to date?
While you're thinking about that, I think having really wonderful, solid friendships, and a great community with the other musicians around the region and outside of the region, and with our neighbors, and solid family. Probably that's that means the most to me.
Yeah, you can't discount that. If I had to like pick a different thing, I would say just the fact that we still get to do this, that we made a choice to get into this business, which is pretty squirrely choice to make. The odds are really stacked against you, and that we've been able to
I told you.
continue to do it for so many years and somehow make it all work.
I told you it would work.
You listened all along. The last one, Jen and Scott Smith, Naked Blue. How do you both wish to be remembered?
Songs from the songs that I've written and that we've written, the catalog.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. That's a legacy. We don't have any kids, so they're like our little kids, I guess. And hopefully they would live on, and somebody 50 years from now can listen to the song and it would make them feel something.
Thank you both for taking part and including that segment, which is almost like being in the psychiatrist
That's a tough one.
chair for about 5 minutes. Yeah, I think I'd struggle because you're kind of almost trying to think on the spot, giving kind of one answer questions to those 13, the last ones. But it's been really interesting from my point of view because I normally talk solo, one-to-one with a person, and I've only spoken, I think, to one husband and wife team who were crime novelists. So it's been really interesting to hear about how you work together, the projects you've worked on, your influences, particularly the Americana tradition, and this fascinating collaboration with Lee Child, and long may it continue. How do we find out more about your music and listen to it? And maybe one day, will we see you this side of the shores in the UK?
I hope so. I hope so. We would love to do that. And we've been talking about that over the last couple of years. But I guess nakedblue.com is our favorite place for people to go. And then, of course, we're on Apple Music and Spotify and Shazam and Pandora, places like that.
Yeah, I think it'd be really fun. Yeah, we would love it. When we got to, it's been a while since we did any touring in the UK, but it was great. We had great fun and loved it. Love to get back. Let's find a way to make it possible. We have friends in Dublin.
Friends in Dublin and in Portugal. And in Turks and Caicos, we did the Turks and Caicos Music Festival a couple of years in a row, and that kind of travel is just fantastic.
Yeah,
I did this.
Yes, bring us over, James.
What was that? Sorry.
Spare room in your house. Bring us over.
Can you make
Yeah,
some
by all
calls?
means. Yeah.
Make some calls for us.
Yeah, I could try. Yeah. I wish you long continued success on your musical journey. Wish you all the very best. And there was a moment in the interview when you spoke about the collaboration with Lee Child, and Mark Knopfler's name was dropped in to the conversation. I thought straight away, that Dire Straits song, Private Investigations. I don't know if you've ever heard that song.
Yeah, oh yeah, I love
which
it.
I thought straight away, that's kind of, you can talk about sort of genres. That's almost like a spy espionage song. Is very different and quite experimental. So that kind of straight came into my head. But thanks for being guest today on Your Take, and thanks for taking part. And I wish you all the very best in the future.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
James.
And we'll look forward to seeing more of your shows too. Really enjoyed this.
No, thank you.